When I collapsed at my office, the paramedic called my only son. He never answered. Instead, his wife posted a family photo with a caption that still haunts me. What she wrote made my blood run cold. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from those who should protect you. Where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments. Let me explain how I ended up here, sharing this story from my quiet living room that I almost lost forever. My name is Helen, and until last year, I believed family was everything. I worked as an office manager at a small law firm for 15 years. Nothing extraordinary about that Tuesday, just mountains of filing and coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since Monday. I was organizing case files when the dizziness hit me like a tidal wave. The room spun, my vision narrowed to a tunnel, and I felt my knees buckle. Helen. My coworker Brenda rushed over as I gripped my desk. Are you all right? Call an ambulance, I managed to whisper before everything went dark. I woke up in the cardiac unit with monitors beeping, and a concerned cardiologist explaining I'd suffered a severe cardiac episode. At 64, my body had decided to stage its own dramatic protest. We contacted your emergency contact, Dr. Abrams said gently. Your son Daniel should be here shortly. Should be. Those words echoed through the silent hours as I watched the hospital door, waiting for Daniel's familiar face. Maybe even his wife Chloe, after 8 years of marriage. The nurses kept checking on me, offering those sympathetic smiles healthcare workers perfect for situations like mine. Day 1 passed. No Daniel. Day 2 brought flowers from my coworkers and a fruit basket from my neighbor, Mr. Peterson. Still no Daniel. Day 3 was when I saw the social media notification on my phone. Chloe had tagged me in a family photograph. Daniel, Chloe, and their twin 6-year-olds at some upscale restaurant. All bright smiles and crystal glasses, the caption read, blissful afternoon free from the attention seeker. Grateful for peaceful family moments. I stared at that screen until my vision blurred. Attention seeker. I'd been hospitalized for 3 days, and I was the attention seeker. That's when my phone began vibrating like an angry hornet. 78 missed calls from Daniel. The messages were frantic. Mom, we need you right now. Answer your phone. This is urgent. Pick up already. I almost answered. Almost slipped back into that familiar pattern of dropping everything whenever my son demanded something. But then I remembered that restaurant photo, Chloe's satisfied smile, and the phrase that kept repeating, attention seeker. Instead of responding, I did something that would alter everything. I contacted my attorney. Mrs. Reynolds, are you completely sure about this? Attorney James Bennett adjusted his reading glasses as he examined the paperwork I'd requested. This is quite comprehensive. I sat in his downtown office exactly 1 week after my hospital release, feeling stronger than I had in years. James, I've never been more certain of anything. The past week had been revealing, to put it mildly. Daniel had appeared at my house the day after I was discharged, not to check on my recovery, but to demand I return his messages immediately. When I'd calmly inquired why he hadn't visited me in the hospital, he'd actually sighed dramatically. Mom, you know how hectic our schedule is with the children. Besides, Chloe thought you were probably exaggerating for sympathy anyway. Exaggerating a cardiac episode for sympathy. At 64, that conversation lasted exactly 4 minutes before I politely asked him to leave. The next day, I drove to James's office with a very specific agenda. So you wish to revoke the financial authority you granted Daniel last year. James flipped through the documents. And you're completely restructuring your estate plan. I'm also liquidating my investment accounts and closing the shared savings Daniel can access. I produced a manila envelope. I've compiled a record of every financial advance I've provided him over the past 8 years. I want formal documentation establishing repayment terms. James's eyebrows lifted. May I inquire what inspired this change? I told him about the hospital, the social media post, the complete absence of any concern for my well-being. When I finished, James was shaking his head. Chloe posted that while you were hospitalized. While I was lying there thinking I might die surrounded by strangers. Yes, James made several notes. The authority revocation is straightforward. The estate changes will take approximately 3 weeks. Regarding the financial advances, he paused. Helen, the total here is substantial. $52,000 over 8 years for various crises and ventures that never materialized. I know. I maintained records. I'd spent the previous evening reviewing old bank statements and payment records. The figures were staggering when totaled. I want a formal repayment schedule, standard interest rates, legally binding documentation. This will likely create significant family discord. I thought about Chloe's social media caption, about Daniel's casual dismissal of my cardiac episode, about 8 years of being treated like a convenient bank with gray hair and a heartbeat. James, I've realized something crucial this week. I've been mistaking being useful for being valued. That stops now. My phone buzzed with another text from Daniel. Mom, this is absurd. Contact me immediately. We have arrangements that require your assistance. Arrangements that required my assistance. Not we're concerned about you or relieved you're recovering. Just more demands on my resources. I showed James the message. He winced. When do you want to serve him with the paperwork? Tomorrow. And James, I want to be present when he receives it. The expression on Daniel's face when James handed him the legal documents was worth every dollar I was spending on legal fees. We were sitting in Daniel's immaculate living room. You know, the one I'd helped purchase with a $25,000 emergency loan 3 years ago. What is this? Daniel scanned the papers, his face growing crimson with each page. It's a formal loan agreement, James explained calmly. Your mother is converting all previous financial support into documented loans with standard repayment terms. Chloe emerged from the kitchen, took one look at the documents in Daniel's hands, and her perfectly made-up face went pale. You cannot be serious, she said, addressing me directly for the first time in months. After everything we've done for you, I nearly laughed. Everything they'd done for me, like ignoring my cardiac episode to post family photos. What precisely have you done for me, Chloe? I kept my voice pleasantly neutral, though my heart was racing. She gestured vaguely around their expensive living space. We include you in family occasions. We permit the children to visit you. We invite you for celebrations. Permit me include me. As if my presence in my own son's life was some kind of charity they bestowed. Mom. Daniel's voice had taken on that whining tone I remembered from his adolescent years. You're overreacting. So Chloe made a minor comment online. So what? We've been family for 8 years. A comment. I retrieved my phone and read the post aloud. Blissful afternoon free from the attention seeker. Which portion was the humorous part, Daniel? The part where I was hospitalized or the part where none of you cared enough to visit? We were occupied. Chloe snapped. The twins had gymnastics lessons and Daniel had that important business call. We cannot abandon our responsibilities every time you experience a minor health scare. A minor health scare. That's what they called my cardiac episode. James cleared his throat. The documentation is quite thorough. The total amount of $52,000 will be repaid over 30 months at 7% interest. Initial payment is due in 30 days. Daniel's face had gone from crimson to purple. $1,700 monthly. Mom, you know we cannot manage that currently. I stood up, surprised by how steady I felt. Then perhaps you should have considered that before you decided I was an attention seeker having a minor health scare. This is ridiculous. Chloe hissed. You're penalizing us because your ego was bruised. No, Chloe. I'm simply treating our financial relationship the way I should have from the beginning, like adults conducting business rather than a parent subsidizing ungrateful children. The twins came running in from the backyard, and for a moment my determination faltered. 7-year-old Lily threw her arms around my waist. Grandma Helen, did you bring us gifts? My heart ached. This was the aspect I'd been dreading most. Not today, sweetheart, but I'll visit soon. I kissed the top of her head, inhaling that sweet child scent that always made me want to forgive anything. Daniel must have noticed my hesitation because his expression shifted. Mom, consider the children. You're truly going to let finances separate us from your only grandchildren. There it was. The manipulation I should have recognized years earlier, using the children as leverage, forcing me to choose between my financial security and access to my grandchildren. For just a heartbeat, I wavered. Then I remembered lying alone in that hospital bed, wondering if I would die surrounded by strangers while my family enjoyed their blissful afternoon. Daniel, the children will always be welcome in my home, but the Bank of Helen is officially closed. As I walked to my vehicle, I heard Chloe's voice through the open window. I told you this would occur if we didn't place her in that retirement community last year. Retirement community. They'd been planning to institutionalize me while continuing to deplete my savings. The pieces were finally falling into place. I sat in my car for a moment, hands trembling slightly as I processed what I'd just learned. This wasn't merely about the social media post or the missed hospital visits. They'd been planning to control my existence completely. My phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Reynolds, this is Jennifer Walsh from Sunrise Gardens Retirement Community. Your son made inquiries about our services last year but never completed the process. Are you still considering our facility? I stared at the message, my blood turning to ice. Daniel had actually contacted retirement communities while I was healthy, independent, and financially supporting his lifestyle. I forwarded the text to James with a message. We need to discuss this. This extends further than I anticipated. The private investigator James recommended looked nothing like I'd expected. Maria Rodriguez was a 40-something former police detective with compassionate eyes and a very serious demeanor as she reviewed the information I'd provided. You suspect your son and daughter-in-law were planning to have you declared incapable. We were sitting in a quiet corner of a downtown cafe, far from anywhere Daniel or Chloe might accidentally spot us. I'd spent the previous week collecting documents and attempting to assemble a timeline that was growing more disturbing daily. Examine this. I showed Maria the retirement community brochure I'd discovered concealed in Daniel's vehicle when I'd borrowed it last month. Plus the text from Sunrise Gardens and this. I handed her a folder containing medical appointment summaries I'd requested from my physician's office. For separate instances over the past year, someone had called inquiring about my cognitive function and whether I displayed indicators of confusion or memory loss. The calls were made by someone identifying as a concerned relative. Maria read from the notes. Dr. Chen documented that you displayed no evidence of cognitive decline during your routine examinations, which indicates someone was searching for proof that didn't exist. I sipped my tea, trying to remain composed. Maria, I need to understand how extensive this is. What exactly were they planning? Maria produced a legal pad. Based on what you've shown me, it appears they may have been constructing a case for conservatorship. If they could demonstrate you were becoming mentally incapable, they could petition the court to make Daniel your legal conservator. The term hung in the air between us like a life sentence. Conservator, which would grant him total control over my finances, my living situation, my medical choices, everything. Once someone obtains conservatorship, they can determine housing arrangements for you. The individual who's supposed to be safeguarding you decides where you reside. Maria's expression was grave. I've witnessed cases where completely capable seniors wind up confined in facilities while their children drain their resources. My hands began shaking. How close were they to succeeding? That's what we need to determine. I'll require authorization to investigate their financial status, their communications with retirement communities, and any legal consultations they may have obtained. I signed the authorization forms without hesitation. Do whatever is necessary. Over the following 3 weeks, Maria uncovered a scheme that was both more elaborate and more heartless than I'd imagined. She called me on a Friday evening with her preliminary findings. Helen, you're going to want to sit down for this. I was already seated, but I gripped the arm of my chair regardless. Daniel and Chloe consulted with an elder law attorney 7 months ago about the conservatorship procedure. They also met with a financial advisor regarding how to manage a substantial inheritance. Most alarming, they've been researching something called quiet title actions. What does that signify? It's a legal process for transferring property ownership when the current owner is incapable of managing their affairs. The room began spinning. My home. They were planning to relocate you into retirement housing. Claim you were incompetent to handle your finances, and eventually transfer ownership of your assets to Daniel as your conservator. The social media post about the attention seeker was probably their method of establishing a narrative about your emotional instability. I considered all the occasions over the past year when Chloe had made subtle remarks about my memory, asking if I was feeling disoriented about simple matters, suggesting I seemed overwhelmed by basic decisions. It hadn't been casual conversation. It had been intelligence gathering. There's additional information, Maria continued. The emergency funds Daniel requested, I traced where that money actually went. The $25,000 for their home renovation went toward a family vacation to Europe. The $18,000 for Lily's educational expenses paid for Chloe's cosmetic procedures. Each revelation felt like another blow to the chest. They'd been systematically stealing from me while building a case to seize everything I owned. Maria, what are my alternatives? Well, the positive news is that you discovered this before they initiated any legal proceedings. The challenging news is that family financial elder exploitation is extremely difficult to prosecute, particularly when it involves loans that weren't properly documented. I considered the loan documents James had prepared, the ones that had made Daniel so furious. What if I already possess documentation now? That assists. But Helen, I must ask, what outcome are you hoping for here? Legal justice, financial recovery, or something different? I gazed out my living room window at the garden I'd nurtured for 18 years in the house I'd worked tirelessly to maintain, thinking about the grandchildren who'd been used as weapons against me, and the son I'd apparently raised to become a predator. I want them to comprehend precisely what they nearly lost, I said finally. And I want to ensure they never get the opportunity to attempt this again. Maria was quiet for a moment. That's going to require a very specific type of strategy. Then let's strategize. For weeks later, I was sitting in the offices of Premier Financial Planning, meeting with someone Daniel and Chloe had never encountered, my new financial advisor, Catherine Chen. The documents spread across her mahogany desk would have shocked my son if he'd known they existed. Mrs. Reynolds, I must say, this is one of the most comprehensive asset protection strategies I've ever implemented on such short notice. I smiled, feeling genuinely content for the first time in months. Catherine, when you discover your own family has been conspiring to steal everything you've worked for, it certainly clarifies your priorities. Maria's investigation had been thorough, but it was Catherine who'd shown me how to construct an impenetrable fortress around my assets. Over the past month, I'd quietly transferred my house into a revocable trust, moved my savings into accounts Daniel couldn't access, and established legal structures that would make any future conservatorship attempts virtually impossible. But the most satisfying aspect was what came next. The charitable foundation is fully established, I inquired, reviewing the paperwork. The Helen Reynolds Foundation for Senior Financial Protection is now a registered nonprofit. You've contributed 65% of your liquid assets, which provides you with significant tax advantages while ensuring the funds can never be accessed by family members seeking conservatorship. I'd retained enough to live comfortably for the remainder of my life. But the majority of my savings, nearly $250,000, was now dedicated to assisting other seniors avoid the trap I'd nearly fallen into. And the public awareness component. Catherine smiled. Your initial speaking engagement is next week at the community center. Local media has confirmed they'll be covering your presentation on elder financial exploitation warning signs. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Mom, we need to talk. Chloe believes perhaps we all overreacted. Can we begin anew? Too little, too late. Maria had delivered copies of the legal documents to my residence yesterday, right on schedule. Daniel and Chloe would have received their copies this morning. Evidence of every falsehood, every manipulation, every step in their conservatorship scheme. He's probably just now realizing his inheritance has disappeared, I told Catherine, showing her the text. How does that feel? I considered the question seriously. 7 months ago, the thought of Daniel being upset with me would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and self-recrimination. Now, liberating, I said, surprised by how authentic it felt. My doorbell chimed that evening at precisely 6:15. Daniel and Chloe stood on my front porch, both appearing exhausted and desperate. Chloe was actually weeping. The first genuine emotion I'd witnessed from her in years. Mom. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. We received the documents from your investigator. This is all a massive misunderstanding. I invited them inside, more curious than angry at this point. They sat stiffly on my sofa while I took my favorite armchair, feeling strangely like I was receiving visitors rather than hosting my own family. Which portion was the misunderstanding? I asked pleasantly. The part where you planned to have me declared incapable, or the part where you intended to steal my home? Chloe's tears intensified. We never intended to harm you. We believed we thought you'd be happier in a location with people your age, where you'd have activities and assistance if you required it. While you resided in my house and spent my money, the attorney stated it was legal, Daniel protested. If someone cannot manage their finances anymore, family must intervene. We were attempting to safeguard you. I retrieved my phone and played a recording Maria had obtained. Daniel's voice came through clearly. The elderly woman's wealthy, but she's never going to utilize it. Should ensure it goes to individuals who can actually benefit from it. The blood drained from Daniel's face. How did you obtain that? Was a confidential discussion with your attorney exploring methods for assuming control of my assets. Interesting definition of safeguarding. Chloe stood up abruptly. Fine. We committed errors, but you're our family. Families forgive one another. I looked at this woman who'd spent 2 years systematically undermining my independence. Who'd posted about my cardiac episode like it was an inconvenience to her social media presence. Chloe, family members don't conspire to steal each other's homes. They don't celebrate when their mother-in-law is hospitalized. And they certainly don't exploit children as emotional leverage. So that's it. Daniel's voice was escalating. You're going to sever ties completely. What about Lily and Noah? You genuinely penalize innocent children because you're angry with us. There it was again. The manipulation, the assumption that I owed them access to my resources regardless of how they treated me. Daniel, your children will always be welcome in my home. You and Chloe, however, are no longer welcome in my life. The loan repayment stands. If you default, I'll pursue legal action. I escorted them to the door feeling strangely serene. Oh, and you might want to watch the local news next week. I'm conducting an interview about elder financial exploitation. I won't identify names, naturally, but the narrative might sound familiar. As their vehicle departed, I realized I wasn't sorrowful or furious anymore. I was proud. For the first time in 8 years, I'd chosen my own well-being over someone else's convenience. My phone rang. It was Lily's voice, bright and innocent. Grandma Helen. Mommy states we cannot visit you anymore because you're being unkind, but I miss you. My heart clenched, but my resolve remained firm. Sweetheart, you can visit me anytime you desire, but it will need to be at my residence with individuals who care for both of us. After I disconnected, I sat in my tranquil living room, surrounded by photographs and mementos of a life I'd constructed with my own efforts. For the first time in years, the silence felt peaceful rather than lonely. Tomorrow, I'd commence sharing my story publicly, assisting other seniors recognize the warning signs I'd nearly overlooked. But tonight, I was simply going to appreciate the profound satisfaction of being precisely where I belonged, in my own home, in command of my own existence, secure from people who'd confused affection with entitlement. The community center was filled beyond capacity when I assumed the platform for my initial speaking engagement. I'd anticipated perhaps 30 or 40 individuals, primarily seniors, concerned about their own families. Instead, I was addressing an audience of nearly 200, including several younger adults taking notes, and at least 2 media cameras. Good morning, my name is Helen Reynolds, and 7 months ago, I nearly lost everything to the individuals I trusted most, my own family. The room was so quiet, I could hear the ventilation system humming. I'd rehearsed this address numerous times, but confronting actual people with their own narratives of betrayal and manipulation made every word feel weightier. How many of you have been requested by your adult children to assist with unexpected costs? Approximately half the hands in the room rose. How many have been informed you're too trusting or too generous with your finances? More hands. And how many have had family members suggest you might be forgetting matters or becoming confused about simple decisions? By now, nearly every senior in the audience had raised their hand at least once. These aren't isolated incidents. They're warning indicators of a systematic approach to financial elder exploitation that's occurring in families throughout America. I told them about Daniel and Chloe's conservatorship scheme, about the fabricated emergency loans, about lying in a hospital bed while they celebrated their blissful afternoon without the attention seeker. But I also told them about Catherine Chen, about Maria Rodriguez, about the legal instruments available to protect themselves. During the question and answer segment, a woman in her 70s stood up. My daughter continues stating I should add her name to my banking accounts just in case. She claims it's normal for families. Is it? The murmur that passed through the audience informed me this woman wasn't alone. Ma'am, adding anyone to your banking accounts grants them immediate access to withdraw every cent you possess. It should only be done with extreme caution and preferably with legal documentation of the conditions. A man near the rear raised his hand. What if it's already too late? What if you've already provided them access and now you're observing issues? I looked directly at him. It's never too late to safeguard what remains. I was 4 weeks from losing my residence when I commenced fighting back. After the presentation, I was surrounded by individuals sharing their own narratives. Horror stories of children who'd moved into family homes and refused to depart, of grandchildren being utilized as emotional weapons, of seniors who discovered too late that their helpful relatives had been systematically draining their accounts. But I also heard narratives of courage, of people who'd recognized the warning indicators and taken action, of families where honest discussions had prevented misunderstandings from becoming exploitation. The local media interview aired that evening. I'd been anxious about going public, concerned about embarrassing Daniel or affecting the twins. But watching the segment, I felt only satisfaction. I'd spoken carefully, never mentioning names, concentrating on systemic issues rather than personal grievances. My phone began ringing before the interview was even concluded. Mrs. Reynolds, this is Margaret Thompson from Channel 7. We'd like to interview you for a segment on elder financial exploitation. Would you be available this week? 3 additional news stations called that night. 2 radio programs, a podcast about family dynamics. Apparently, my narrative had resonated with individuals far beyond my small community. But the call that mattered most arrived at 11 p.m. Lily's voice whispering, "Grandma Helen, I observed you on television. Daddy's extremely upset, but I believed you appeared lovely." My throat tightened. "Thank you, sweetheart. How are you managing?" "Mommy and Daddy argue frequently now about financial matters. Daddy stated you stole his inheritance, but Mommy stated you never guaranteed him anything. I don't comprehend adult matters." Neither did I, apparently, until it was nearly too late. "Lily, darling, your daddy and I are experiencing some disagreements currently, but that doesn't alter how deeply I care for you and Noah. Can we still visit you?" I scanned my tranquil house, considering the foundation I was constructing, the seniors I was assisting, the life I was creating on my own conditions. "Anytime you desire, sweetheart, but it might be a while before your parents feel comfortable with that." After she disconnected, I sat with my tea, processing the day. 7 months ago, I'd been a lonely widow whose greatest fear was being abandoned by her family. Now I was a public speaker, a foundation director, and apparently some type of reluctant authority on financial elder exploitation. The irony wasn't lost on me. Daniel and Chloe's scheme to isolate and control me had backfired spectacularly. Instead of making me more dependent, their betrayal had compelled me to build a completely independent existence. Instead of keeping me quiet and compliant, their manipulation had provided me with a platform and a voice. My phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "Observed you on the news tonight. Thank you for providing me the courage to request my son for documentation of the $35,000 I loaned him last year. Discovered he's been deceiving about what it was for. Margaret K." That text was worth more than any amount Daniel could ever repay. I was constructing something now that was larger than my hurt feelings or family drama. I was creating resources for individuals who found themselves in situations I'd nearly been trapped in. And tomorrow I had 3 additional speaking engagements scheduled, and a meeting with a publisher interested in transforming my narrative into a book. Daniel had labeled me an attention seeker. Turns out he was correct. I was attention-seeking enough to survive his attempted financial destruction and transform it into something that would assist thousands of other individuals. Sometimes the finest revenge is living well. And sometimes it's ensuring your narrative prevents other families from making the identical errors yours did. The correspondence arrived on a Wednesday, delivered by certified mail with Daniel's signature required. I observed from my living room window as the postal employee handed him the thick envelope, witnessed his face transform as he read the return address. Bennett and Associates, attorneys at law. It had been 3 months since my television interview, and the response had been overwhelming. The Helen Reynolds Foundation was now receiving calls from seniors across 4 states. I'd been invited to speak at conferences in Chicago and Atlanta. And most significantly, I'd been collaborating with James Bennett on something that would guarantee Daniel and Chloe could never attempt their conservatorship scheme again. The telephone rang within an hour of the mail delivery. "Mom, what the hell is this?" Daniel's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "I assume you're referring to the competency assessment report." I maintained my tone pleasant and professional. Dr. Sarah Chen is one of the most respected geriatric psychiatrists in the state. Her evaluation should resolve any concerns about my mental capacity permanently. The 3-hour assessment had been Maria's suggestion. If Daniel and Chloe ever tried to claim I was incapable, we wanted ironclad proof of my mental acuity from an unimpeachable source. A perfect score on cognitive testing, I continued, enjoying the silence on his end. Excellent emotional regulation, superior financial reasoning abilities, and I quote, no evidence whatsoever of diminished capacity or decision-making ability. Dr. Chen was particularly impressed by my strategic planning capabilities. Why are you doing this to us? The whine in his voice reminded me of his teenage years when consequences finally caught up with his decisions. Daniel, I'm protecting myself from individuals who attempted to steal my home and my independence. The reality that those individuals happen to be my son and daughter-in-law is unfortunate, but it doesn't alter what you attempted. We never tried to steal anything. We were concerned about you living alone, making financial choices without guidance. We believed you thought you could manipulate me into retirement housing while you relocated into my residence and managed my assets. Maria's investigation was extremely thorough. A lengthy pause. Then you hired a private investigator to surveil your own family to protect myself from people who were planning to have me declared incapable. Yes. I could hear Chloe's voice in the background, sharp and angry, though I couldn't distinguish the words. Mom, this has gone too far. Chloe's discussing relocating out of state, taking the children somewhere we can commence fresh. There it was, the final card in their manipulation deck. Remove my access to Lily and Noah unless I capitulated to their demands. That's certainly your decision, Daniel. Though I'm curious how you'll finance a relocation while you're still repaying the $52,000 in loans. Those weren't loans. They were gifts. Family assisting family. Then you won't mind the payment schedule James prepared. $1,700 monthly for 30 months commencing next week. We cannot manage $1,700 monthly. You understand that? I did understand that. Maria's financial investigation had revealed that Daniel and Chloe were living far beyond their means, utilizing credit cards and loans to sustain a lifestyle they couldn't genuinely afford. My emergency funds had been subsidizing their spending for years. Then I recommend you modify your lifestyle accordingly. Downsize the residence, trade the luxury vehicles, cancel the country club membership, exist within your actual means for once. You're truly going to ruin your own family over finances. The audacity was breathtaking. They'd tried to have me declared incapable, steal my house, and institutionalize me in retirement housing, but I was the one ruining the family. Daniel, I'm not ruining anything. I'm simply refusing to finance my own victimization any longer. The children inquire about you. Lily weeps because she doesn't comprehend why Grandma doesn't visit anymore. My chest tightened, but I compelled myself to remain focused. Lily is welcome to visit me anytime. You understand that. But I won't pretend that what you and Chloe did was acceptable just to maintain access to my grandchildren. So that's it. You're selecting pride over family. I'm choosing self-respect over exploitation. There's a distinction. After I disconnected, I sat quietly for several minutes, processing the discussion. A year ago, Daniel's threats to relocate with the children would have sent me into a panic. I would have apologized, capitulated, done whatever was necessary to sustain the relationship. Now I felt sorrowful but not desperate. The foundation work was providing me purpose. The speaking engagements were connecting me with individuals who valued my experience and insight. I had created an existence that didn't depend on other people's approval or access to their children. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine Chen. The trust modifications are complete. Your assets are now protected by structures that would require a team of attorneys and several years to challenge successfully. Another text from Maria. The background examination on the retirement community reveals they've been investigated 3 times for questionable practices regarding resident assets. Your instincts about avoiding that location were accurate. And finally, a message from someone I didn't recognize. Mrs. Reynolds, my name is Patricia Johnson. I heard your interview on the radio last week and realized my daughter has been employing the exact same tactics you described. With your guidance and a competent attorney, I halted her before she could obtain conservatorship. Thank you for preserving my independence. A fellow resilient woman. I printed Patricia's message and added it to the folder I maintained of similar letters and emails. Nearly 60 now from individuals who'd recognized the warning indicators and taken action to protect themselves. Outside my window, I could observe Daniel and Chloe loading luggage into their vehicle, probably going to stay with her parents while they determined matters. Part of me wanted to rush outside, apologize for everything, offered to forgive and forget just to have access to Lily and Noah again. But a larger portion of me recognized that surrendering now would only teach them that threats and emotional blackmail still functioned. That I was still the same woman who could be manipulated and controlled. I wasn't that woman anymore. I was someone who hired private investigators when threatened. Someone who constructed legal fortresses around her assets. Someone who transformed personal betrayal into public education. I was, as Daniel had once labeled me, an attention seeker. And I was finally proud of it. The call arrived at 6:15 in the morning, startling me from sleep. Unfamiliar number, but something compelled me to answer regardless. Mrs. Reynolds, this is Detective Rebecca Santos with the State Attorney General's office. I need to speak with you about your son, Daniel. I sat up completely alert now. Is everything all right? Has something occurred to him? Ma'am, we've been investigating a financial fraud scheme involving retirement communities. Your son's name has emerged in our investigation. My blood went cold. What type of fraud scheme? Can we meet in person? This isn't something I wish to discuss over the telephone. 2 hours later, Detective Santos was sitting in my living room with a folder thick with documents and photographs. She was younger than I'd anticipated, maybe 40, with the type of weary eyes that suggested she'd witnessed excessive family-related cruelty in her profession. Mrs. Reynolds, we've been tracking a network of individuals who target seniors for financial exploitation. They collaborate with certain retirement facilities to create artificial emergencies that require conservatorship proceedings. She opened her folder and showed me a photograph of a man I'd never encountered before. This is David Kellerman. He approaches families with senior members who possess significant assets. He assists them build cases for incapacity declarations. What does this have to do with Daniel? Detective Santos produced another photograph. This one showed Daniel and Chloe sitting across from David Kellerman, in what appeared to be a restaurant booth. This image was captured 4 months ago. We believe your son and daughter-in-law hired Mr. Kellerman to assist them gain conservatorship over you. The room started spinning. It was one matter to know Daniel had consulted with an attorney about conservatorship. It was another to learn he'd been collaborating with professional criminals. What precisely does this network perform? They assist family members manufacture evidence of mental incapacity. Then expedite conservatorship proceedings through judges who don't inquire too thoroughly. Once they have control, they place the senior in a facility that overcharges for care while systematically draining their assets. Detective Santos showed me more photographs, a luxurious retirement community that appeared more like an institution. Documents displaying residents charged $16,000 monthly for basic care while their families sold off their homes and investments. How many individuals are involved in this scheme? We've identified at least 45 families across 7 states. The estimated theft exceeds $14 million. $14 million stolen from seniors who trusted their own children. Mrs. Reynolds, we believe your son paid Mr. Kellerman $22,000 for his services. The emergency loan for Lily's educational costs. The funds that had actually paid for Chloe's cosmetic enhancements. Except apparently some of it had gone to hire a professional to assist them steal my existence. What do you require from me? Detective Santos leaned forward. We need you to contemplate wearing a recording device. The term struck me like a physical impact. You desire me to surveil my own son. Daniel has been attempting to contact you. Hasn't he trying to reconcile? I considered the increasingly desperate voicemails he'd been leaving. The flowers that arrived yesterday with a card reading, "Please pardon me, Mom. We need to discuss." Yes, but I've been disregarding him. What if you didn't? What if you agreed to meet with him and permitted him to explain himself? I stared at the photographs spread across my coffee table. My son, sitting with a professional criminal, planning to have me declared incapable, and warehoused in a facility that would gradually drain every cent I'd worked 45 years to save. You believe he'll confess? Criminals become careless when they're desperate. Mr. Kellerman has been arrested and his associates are communicating to protect themselves. Daniel understands his scheme is collapsing. He might state matters he wouldn't normally express. I considered Lily and Noah, innocent children caught in the middle of their parents' greed. About the seniors I'd been addressing, sharing my narrative to prevent exactly this type of exploitation. If I perform this, what occurs to Daniel? Detective Santos's expression was compassionate but firm. Ma'am, your son hired a professional criminal to assist him steal your home and your independence. The state treats elder financial exploitation very seriously. He could receive prison time. He could receive prison time for what he already committed. Mrs. Reynolds, we're simply attempting to gather evidence to halt him from doing it to other families. I scanned my living room, considering how close I'd come to losing all of this. If I hadn't experienced that cardiac episode, if I hadn't seen Chloe's social media post, if I hadn't become angry enough to fight back, I'd probably be sitting in a sterile facility currently while Daniel sold my furniture and Chloe redecorated my residence. Other families. Mr. Kellerman's records show he was already collaborating with your son to identify other potential targets. Elderly neighbors, friends from your community, individuals who trust your family and might be vulnerable to similar schemes. Mrs. Peterson from next door, Sarah Williams from my reading group. Gentle, trusting women who'd known Daniel since he was a child and would never suspect he might attempt to harm them. When do you require an answer? Daniel called this morning requesting to meet with you tomorrow afternoon. If you're willing to assist us, we need to prepare today. I considered the woman I'd been a year ago. Trusting, accommodating, willing to sacrifice anything to maintain family harmony. Then I considered the woman I'd become, someone who hired private investigators and constructed legal fortresses and transformed personal betrayal into public education. Detective Santos, if wearing a recording device helps prevent other families from experiencing what I've endured, then yes, I'll perform it. She nodded grimly. I should caution you, Mrs. Reynolds. What you hear tomorrow might be challenging. When individuals believe they're addressing someone they can manipulate, they often reveal more than you might wish to know. I considered the social media posts celebrating my cardiac episode. About the retirement community brochures concealed in Daniel's vehicle, about the professional criminal he'd hired to steal my existence. Detective, I believe I've already heard the worst of it. But as it transpired, I was mistaken. The recording device was smaller than I'd anticipated, just a tiny mechanism secured under my blouse. Detective Santos and her team were parked in an unmarked van across the street from the coffee shop where Daniel had requested to meet me. I felt strangely calm as I entered, spotted him at a corner table, and compelled myself to smile like nothing had altered. Mom. Daniel stood up awkwardly, clearly uncertain whether to embrace me or shake my hand. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I sat across from him, noticing how exhausted he appeared, dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled shirt, the type of stressed appearance that comes from sleeping poorly for weeks. You stated it was urgent. He nodded, glancing around nervously. Mom, I need to inform you some matters about what genuinely occurred with the conservatorship matters. About why we committed it. The recording mechanism felt warm against my skin, as I leaned forward encouragingly. I'm listening. First, you must comprehend that we never intended to harm you. Everything we committed, we believed it was for your own benefit. The falsehoods came so effortlessly to him. I wondered if he actually believed them or if this was just the narrative he'd practiced. Explain it to me. Daniel retrieved his phone and showed me a photograph of a house I didn't recognize. Massive, sprawling with a circular driveway and what appeared to be a 3-car garage. This is in Scottsdale. Chloe discovered it 4 months ago. It's ideal for the children. Excellent schools, swimming pool, sufficient space for everyone. He paused meaningfully. Including you. It's beautiful, but I don't comprehend what this has to do with we were going to surprise you, relocate you to Arizona with us, get you settled in a stunning location where you'd have professional care accessible, activities with people your age. The facility we examined has golf, creative workshops, even a library, the retirement community. He was presenting their plan to institutionalize me as a present. That's very considerate, but Daniel, I'm content in my own residence. His expression shifted, becoming more desperate. Mom, you cannot perceive it, but you're declining. The forgetfulness, the confusion about financial judgments, the manner you overreacted to that minor social media post. Chloe and I have been worried sick. I nearly laughed. Minor social media post. Celebrating my cardiac episode was minor. What financial confusion? All those loans you provided us without proper documentation. A capable individual would have insisted on contracts, payment conditions. You simply handed over funds because we requested. That's not normal conduct for someone handling their finances responsibly. The audacity was breathtaking. He was utilizing my generosity as evidence of incapacity. So you determined I required professional assistance. We consulted with a specialist. Yes. Someone who assists families navigate these challenging transitions. He leaned forward earnestly. Mom, conservatorship isn't about taking anything away from you. It's about safeguarding you from individuals who might attempt to exploit you. What individuals? Daniel's face darkened. That private investigator you hired for one. Do you have any concept how much she charged you? Over $9,000 to unearth information on your own family. A capable individual wouldn't have fallen for that deception. Safeguarding me by stealing my residence and warehousing me against my will while simultaneously accusing the individuals actually safeguarding me of being deceptions. The psychological manipulation was masterful. Inform me about the specialist you consulted. His name was David Kellerman. He specializes in assisting families with senior care transitions. He clarified how the legal system functions, how to document concerns about someone's declining capacity. What type of documentation? Daniel reached into his jacket and produced a small notebook. My heart stopped as I recognized it. My own handwriting filled the sheets. We maintained records of incidents that displayed you were experiencing issues. Memory lapses, poor judgment calls, emotional reactions. He opened the notebook and read. March 18th. Mom forgot she'd already compensated her utility bill. Paid it twice. March 25th. Couldn't recall the name of her neighbor's new puppy. Appeared confused when questioned. April 7th became unreasonably furious when asked straightforward questions about her finances. Each entry was a normal moment twisted into evidence of mental deterioration. Paying a bill twice, something that occurs to everyone occasionally. Not recalling a neighbor's pet's name, hardly an indicator of dementia. Becoming angry when interrogated about personal finances, actually a healthy reaction. Daniel, these are ordinary matters. Everyone forgets details sometimes. Not like this, Mom. Kellerman clarified that families frequently don't notice the early indicators because they occur progressively. He assisted us perceive the design. What was the strategy once you had conservatorship? Daniel's expression brightened, as if he was describing a wonderful holiday. The residence in Scottsdale has a separate wing perfect for you. 2 sleeping rooms, a sitting space, your own entrance. The retirement community is only 12 minutes away for when you require more comprehensive care. And my residence here, we'd market it. Naturally, utilize the funds for your care expenses. Kellerman stated the typical duration in memory support is about 5 years, so we needed to plan appropriately. 5 years. They'd computed precisely how long they anticipated me to exist and planned to spend my money accordingly. What about the foundation I established? Daniel's face hardened. Mom, that's exactly the type of poor financial judgment we're attempting to safeguard you from. Donating hundreds of thousands of dollars to strangers because you're angry with your family. Kellerman stated that type of resentment-based expenditure is a classic indicator of diminished capacity. Utilizing my own advocacy work as evidence that I was mentally incapable, I had to admire the thoroughness of their gaslighting. Did Kellerman charge you for this guidance? Daniel hesitated just long enough to inform me the reality. He's a professional consultant. Naturally, there were fees involved. How much? That's not significant. What matters is safeguarding you. I leaned back, processing everything he'd expressed. The recording mechanism was capturing every word of his confession, his casual description of the conspiracy to steal my independence, his complete lack of recognition that what he'd planned was criminal. Daniel, what if I don't wish to relocate to Arizona? What if I desire to remain in my own residence? His mask slipped completely. Mom, you don't get to make that selection anymore. That's the entire purpose of conservatorship. When someone cannot make responsible decisions for themselves, the family must intervene. And if I contest it, Kellerman stated family conservatorship disputes rarely proceed the manner the senior desires them to, particularly when there's documented evidence of declining capacity and a background of poor financial judgment. There it was. The threat underneath all the concern and caring. Submit to their control or be forcibly declared incapable. I stood up gradually, gazing down at this stranger who somehow had my son's face. Daniel, I need to utilize the restroom. I'll return shortly. In the bathroom, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the confused, deteriorating senior Daniel had described. She was someone who'd constructed a legal fortress, exposed a criminal conspiracy, and was about to assist law enforcement protect other families. When I returned to the table, Detective Santos was sitting in my chair. Daniel's face was white as paper. Mr. Reynolds, she stated calmly. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder financial exploitation. As they escorted him away in restraints, Daniel turned back to me with an expression of complete bewilderment. Mom, I was attempting to safeguard you. Why would you perform this to your own family? I looked at this man I'd raised who'd hired criminals to steal my existence and presented it as affection. Daniel, I am safeguarding my family. I'm safeguarding other people's families from you. The recording mechanism under my blouse felt warm against my skin. Evidence of a discussion that would prevent other seniors from confronting the nightmare I'd nearly lived through. Sometimes being an attention seeker means ensuring the appropriate individuals hear your narrative. 7 months later, I was sitting in a filled courtroom observing my son's sentencing hearing. Daniel had pleaded guilty to elder financial exploitation conspiracy as part of an arrangement that would keep him out of federal prison, but would require 6 years of probation and restitution payments to the state's victim assistance program. Chloe had filed for divorce for weeks after his arrest. She'd relocated to her parents' residence in Washington with Lily and Noah, severing all contact with Daniel and unfortunately with me. I comprehended her need to protect the children from the media attention, but that didn't make it ache any less. David Kellerman received 9 years in federal prison. The criminal network he'd constructed had stolen more than $16 million from seniors across 8 states. The judge called it one of the most callous and systematic exploitation schemes she'd ever witnessed. But what mattered most to me was what had developed from the ashes of my family's betrayal. The Helen Reynolds Foundation was now operating in 14 states, providing legal assistance and education to seniors confronting financial exploitation. We'd assisted over 400 families recognize warning indicators and take protective action. We'd lobbied for stronger conservatorship oversight legislation and created a rapid response network for families in crisis. My publication, The Attention Seeker's Handbook to Family Financial Abuse, had become an unexpected bestseller. The title was my own minor act of defiance, reclaiming the label Daniel had utilized to dismiss me and transforming it into a badge of honor. I'd received thousands of letters from readers, but the one I treasured most was written in careful 7-year-old handwriting. Dear Grandma Helen, Mommy states we relocated because Daddy made poor decisions. I miss you, but I observed your image in a periodical at the dental office. The article stated you assist individuals who are frightened. I hope you assist numerous individuals. Love, Lily. P.S. Noah learned to ride a bicycle. I maintained that letter on my desk next to a photograph of us from happier periods. Before I comprehended what Daniel and Chloe were capable of, standing outside the courthouse after the sentencing, I was surrounded by reporters and advocates who'd come to hear the conclusion of what the media had dubbed the model son scandal. Mrs. Reynolds, one reporter called out, how does it feel to witness your son sentenced for attempting to defraud you? I considered carefully before responding. It feels like justice. Not because I desired to witness my son penalized, but because his actions are finally being acknowledged for what they were, criminal exploitation of someone he was supposed to safeguard. Do you have any regrets about exposing the conspiracy? That was the question I'd been asking myself for months. Did I regret destroying my relationship with Daniel? Did I regret losing access to my grandchildren? Did I regret transforming family anguish into public advocacy? I regret that it was necessary, I stated finally. I regret that my son selected to perceive me as a resource to exploit rather than an individual to respect, but I don't regret protecting myself, and I don't regret preventing other families from experiencing what I endured. What's next for you? I smiled, considering the speaking tour scheduled for next month, the new legislation being introduced based on our advocacy efforts, the Foundation's expansion into elder law reform. Additional attention seeking, I suppose, the beneficial type, where standing up for yourself assists other individuals discover their voice, too. That evening, I sat in my living room, the identical living room Daniel had planned to market while I was warehoused in retirement housing, reading emails from seniors around the nation. A woman in Texas whose daughter had been pressuring her to add names to her banking accounts. A man in Florida whose son was pushing him to market his residence and relocate with family. Individuals who'd read my publication recognized their own circumstances and taken action to protect themselves. Each message was a reminder that my family's attempted betrayal had been transformed into something larger and more meaningful than personal vengeance. I wasn't just the woman who'd caught her son attempting to steal her residence. I was someone who'd transformed that experience into a movement. My telephone rang. The caller identification displayed a number I didn't recognize, but I'd learned to answer those calls. They were frequently from individuals who required assistance. Is this Helen Reynolds? The woman who authored the publication? Yes, this is Helen. Ma'am, my name is Patricia Williams. I believe my grandson is attempting to have me declared incapable. I discovered some documents he concealed in his chamber, and they resemble the matters you described in your publication. I don't know what to perform. I reached for my notebook, the one where I maintained contact information for attorneys, investigators, and advocates in every state. Patricia, you've accomplished the most challenging portion already. You've recognized what's occurring and decided to protect yourself. Now permit me to assist you determine your subsequent actions. As I commenced guiding Patricia through the warning indicators and protective measures, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me wasn't the trusting, accommodating individual I'd been a year and a half ago. This woman had survived attempted financial annihilation by her own family and transformed that survival into a mission. Daniel had been correct about one matter. I was an attention seeker. I was attention-seeking enough to fight back when assaulted. Attention-seeking enough to hire investigators and construct legal fortresses. Attention-seeking enough to transform personal betrayal into public education. And most significantly, attention-seeking enough to ensure that other seniors wouldn't have to lie alone in hospital beds, wondering if their families perceived them as burdens to be managed rather than individuals to be cherished. Some narratives conclude with reconciliation and forgiveness. This one concluded with something superior. The knowledge that even the cruelest betrayal can become the foundation for safeguarding other individuals from the identical destiny. I was precisely where I belonged. In my own residence, in command of my own existence, utilizing my voice to ensure other individuals could state the identical matter. The attention seeker had discovered her platform, and the presentation was far from concluded. Your greatest power emerges when you stop fearing abandonment. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to Winds of Thought. Your engagement helps share these important stories with others who might need to hear them. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who confuse love with entitlement? Share your experiences in the comments below.